All right. Thank you and welcome to session 2 of Finding Your Signature Style. Now, I just want to give a couple of things before we get started today. This Finding Your Signature Style visual that I created for the class, it was dark and sort of murky on purpose because sometimes finding our signature style, the process of that can feel dark and murky. And so I'm hoping through this process, you're going to start to see the light. And if you don't, that's okay. I also want to remind you to move from any kind of judgment to wonder and curiosity. And so I learned when I was dealing with some anger issues and some judgment things that if I could be curious and have a mindset of wonder, things would emerge. And so for those of you who are asking or wondering, when am I going to find my signature style? It's through these exercises that you're going to go through. And if you're really looking closely enough, they are there. I can guarantee you they're there. It's just that what is the lens or the curtain or some of the fogginess that's in the way of you being able to find it. So I just want to let you know that hope is not lost. It's you already have a signature style. I can see that by what you're posting on the Padlet, even before you started focusing on consistency. So thank you all for being open to this process. So again, what's our purpose? Well, it's to find our signature style, of course, but it's going to happen through a series of processes. And so improving your handwriting. So those of you who were in the first session and did the homework, I've already seen huge improvements, and you probably have too, because you've put, even if it's only been a few minutes, you've put some concerted focus and effort into that. And I want you to start identifying those natural tendencies. And some of you are able to put it into words. That's great. Some of you might not be able to find the words, like you can see it and you can feel it, but you're not quite sure how to describe it. And I'm getting some private emails from people saying, I can't see my attributes. That's okay. We're going to meet again in pairs today, and you'll have a chance to meet with some other folks so that you can look at each other's lettering and start to help each other find those words. And of course, anytime you want to put your work up on the Padlet, I'm happy to give you feedback as well. And eventually you're going to refine your style. And again, I said before, people are like popcorn, remember? And so you're all going to pop at different rates. Some of you are going to see it immediately because maybe you have some experience lettering or in calligraphy. And some of you, it's going to still seem like there's a fog or a wall between you and your style. So I don't want to tell you not to worry, because I can't. You're going to either worry or stress about it, whether I tell you or not. So let's go ahead and get started, and let me grab my handouts. Hopefully you have those too. If for some reason you don't, please let me know in the chat and I will put those in the chat, but you should have these. These are for day or session 2. So these are the second set, and I did share them with you in an email. So if you need to go back and grab those, that's great too. And just want to make sure I get my chat up. Here we go. So I've just written this part here as a note to myself that we're going to have a new pangram. And what you're going to want to have on hand with you today is whatever tool you have been using that's your favorite, whatever that is. I might grab a couple of things here because these are all monoline tools. And then I want you to grab a tool that maybe is going to be a bit of a stretch for you. So if you've been using a monoline tool, and I'm just saying that because many of you have, then I'm going to challenge you to choose either a brush tool or a tool that has a broad edge to it, something that's got a bit of a broad edge. And it could be big, it could be small, but just know, remember when we talk about consistency and our forms and shape, that if it's the bigger the tool, the bigger the letter. So just keep that in mind. So if you want to do something comparatively, so for instance, I personally love a real brush, and I like this is called a Pintail color brush. I love that when I move to my brush, but if I'm going from something like a 1mm monoline, I might want to keep it really similar in size so that it doesn't throw me off too much. That's going from, okay, we're going to go from riding our bicycle on the street to just jumping right into the mountains, right? So might get a little wobbly there. So just want to remind you to have that on hand, have your stretch tool on hand, have your handouts on hand, and you'll probably want a couple of extra pieces of paper because you might run out of space, or there's going to be an opportunity where I might go a little rogue on you. You're also going to want to have your phone so you can take a picture of whatever you're working on, so we can also post it on Padlet. So I want to start out by asking everyone some percolation. So what came up for you this past week? What did you notice while you were practicing? I'd love to hear some of your insights. It could be positive, they can be negative, whatever it is you came across. So go ahead and unmute, or feel free to put that in the chat. What came up for you?
I was reminded how much I need to practice. I greatly appreciated the focused practice exercises, though, because it made it more efficient. But there's still there's still a discipline that's required, and nobody can help me with that but me.
Well, let's talk about that. Does anyone have anything to add to either feeling the need to practice or finding the discipline to practice? What's worked for some folks?
Hi there, I'll
Yeah.
jump in. Oh, sorry, Shelby, please.
Oh, go ahead.
One of the things that works for me is early morning when it's quiet in the house, and it's kind of that nice time of day before I've hopefully spent much time on my phone and things. And I'm listening to the news, and I just try to, scribe what is being said on the news, and not in a easy way to understand necessarily, but it gets me out of kind of my own mind and thinking about what I'm hearing. So I try to go a little slower than I usually do. But it's just, 10 or 15 minutes. So I'm paying attention to something of interest and I'm lettering.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nora, because taking time, especially early in the morning before the rest of the world wakes up and tells you who you are, before your email starts going berserk or your phone, practicing in the morning, if you're a morning person, or practicing in the evening, if you're a late night person, is a great time because you're not going to get those interruptions, and then you can have that solitude. But that feeling of needing to practice, I can tell you, it never ends. So you're going to have to find comfort in that. And the reason why I say that is because since our last session, my big percolation is, and I don't know where this came from, I just had this strong urge, was to really go back to my cursive writing, like elementary school writing. And when I started practicing it again, I felt like, I can't get good enough at this. I can't get good enough at this. And so that feeling of not being good enough, what we see in our mind's eye and what our hands do is often two different things. I would say, until you are a master, I'd say, get 50 years of this, of actually focused process of this. And some of us may not have 50 years to do this, right? That feeling may or may not ever land. And yeah, good. Okay, we've got some really great stuff in the chat. What other burning percolations did you have? What did you notice this week? Anyone who wants to unmute, and then I can read through the chat.
This is maybe an aside in a way, but I did sort of an assessment of what I use handwriting for. And I'm a calligrapher, so I write all the time. I letter all the time, but actual handwriting, I sort of narrowed it down to my 6-line journal, the quotes that I write and keep in notebooks. I write letters to a few people, and then notes and lists. Whereas I used to do a lot more handwriting for students and for just faculty and things like that. But it was just an interesting assessment.
That's fantastic. And for others who are, I saw a few heads nodding, this is a really key piece, because ask yourself how you're using specifically your handwriting, because that's what we're doing here. We're not learning italic. We're not learning a certain calligraphic hand that we're going to use for a certain purpose. For the visual practitioners in the room, I'm not showing you double stroke, first stroke, or a specific way to hold a certain marker to get a certain lettering style for a certain size, for hierarchy in the work that we do. I mean, you can drill all that down and get really specific around styles. But when it comes to your handwriting, where are you using it? And I'd love to see in the chat how some of you are also using it, because this will help start the assessment. It could be making lists, like you said, writing a note to someone. I have found that, I really have to pay attention if I'm going to write a note to someone, because they're going to look at it because it's coming from me. But in reality, if any of you have ever received a quick note from me, that was quickly written because I had to get it out, and I was thinking about you, but I wasn't thinking about my letters, right? So yeah, how are you using your handwriting is a really great way to contextualize it and then say, okay, again, how is it going to look? What's the tool? And it's a very different purpose, our handwriting, than if we're doing calligraphy, if we're putting letters with our artwork, or if we're graphic recording or doing graphic facilitation. Great. Anyone want to add to what Shelby was saying or have some question around that?
Hi, it's Linda.
Yeah.
A couple of things. I found that when I changed tools, my letters changed. How I write the letters changed.
Yes.
And I also found that as soon as I thought about the fact that other people would be seeing it, my letters got worse.
Why do you think that happened?
I don't know. I don't know if it's that, or I just kind of always start out the first half of the line pretty neatly. And then by the end of the line, I start to get smaller and less neat, and I start leaving letters out. But even as I was trying not to do that, I noticed that I still did the same thing.
So thank you for being brave and saying that last part. It's obvious that if we change tools, our letters are going to change, especially if we're changing the type of nib, because we're holding it slightly differently. I love what you said about you start out really focused and then pretty soon that kind of goes away. That comes from you literally are taking for granted that you know what you're doing. Your adult mind has stepped in and said, I got this. And then you make a mistake, and then you see the mistake, and then, oh my gosh, it's like you almost want to give up. You're like, I got to throw this piece of paper away and start over, right? That's the adult mind being judgy, right?
Yes.
So mistakes happen. So thank you for sharing that, because we all go through that. And I will say this, I'm going to show you my face because I hope that you can hear this. When I first started out in my first lettering year, actually prior to my lettering year, which was 2016, in 2014, I was so focused on my lettering that even if I wrote something out and put it on a light box and said, okay, I'm going to go over it and trace it, or I'm going to make it better than what's already there, for some reason, I still couldn't do it. And I thought, what is getting in the way? And when I thought that someone else was going to see it, my anxiety would raise, and then I would make mistakes, even though I was focused. And I thought, what is wrong with me? So when I would say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to do this for me, and nobody else knows what it should look like. Then my anxiety would lower, my letters would get better. And what would happen is physically, this is a physical thing that's happening to us because we don't have the anxiety, we don't have that stress, then we can build the right muscle memory. Our body is communicating better with itself. So Jessica, you have your hand up. Do you have something to add here?
Yeah, because what worked for me really well is giving some kudos to Brandy over here. Really at the start of her visual thinking training, she talks about, we have the proverb, practice makes perfect. But she talks about practice makes progress. That's right. And also, I'm also doing some sketch noting, and there you have one of the paradoxes is it's content over art. So you shouldn't worry too much about the end results, but more about the process. And so that really helps me in also. And also one of the things in sketchnoting is share before you dare.
Yes.
So don't worry about whether it's perfect or not, just get it out there. And what I noticed is I don't do a lot of live graphic recording on large scale, but I did once or twice. And one of those is in my office somewhere on a board. And it's been there already for a year, I think. Yeah. And when I show it to other people when I'm at the office, more often I show it to others, the more I see it the way they see it. So
Right.
I appreciate it a lot more now than I did right after I was drawing it.
Yeah. And I think, yes, and I think whether you're a
yeah.
visual practitioner or a calligrapher, once you finish with something, and even if whether it's right away or you've stepped away and come back to it, all of a sudden our adult mind is going to say, oh my gosh, I want to redo the whole thing. Right.
Yeah.
But the reality is no one knows what that was supposed to look like except for you. And you can always see where there's room for improvement. Take this quote, for instance, not what it says, but how it looks. This is not my best work. However, I was sitting in a meeting. Someone said this. I wrote it down on a great big sticky note and went, this is an important thing for people to see and hear. Now, if I were to rewrite this nicely, okay, that's okay. Good. But I could rewrite this 100 times and I'd never get it to the level where it's like, okay, it's perfect now, right? I would get it to good enough. So that's really key. Yeah.
And it's more about the message than about the art. The content is more important than the art.
Yeah. So
that works for me.
Yes, good. Right. And if it's communicating the message, then, and if that's what the intent is, then that's good enough. Right. And I know that for some of you, good enough is really hard to accept, right? Good enough, press on, Geppo. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that. I'll put that in the chat. That's something that you can tell yourself if it's good enough, press on. And then what does good enough mean? Well, you are the one that gets to determine the criteria. Yeah. And some of you also, yeah, so Neelam, some of you also may have other words instead of Geppo. So Neelam's asking, Jessica, share before you care. What does that mean? So if you could type that in the chat, that would be great because Jolene has her hand up. And Jolene, I think you're muted. So yeah.
So I was just going to say, I found my signature style.
Yay.
No, I had it. I've just been fighting it.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that I've wanted to do something. And so I am a graphic reporter. And so I do need to go quickly. So watching the bonus video, Heather, I went to my font and I was listening to you say that you liked a certain lettering style because it was round. You didn't like one because it was slanted or whatever. And so I got looking through them and I'm like, oh, I like this slant. And so then I was looking at my first like scribble that we did on the day one. I'm like, well, that's kind of that's my default. That's my go-to. That's my quick. So if I can just clean that up a little bit, I won't have to fight myself anymore, but I could just go for it. Yay!
All right. So that's the golden ticket. And until you physically experience that, we're hearing it cognitively thinking, oh, I wish that could happen to me. But again, I'll put in Jolene's words in another way. And that is, as you're writing, notice what's naturally happening. Then notice when you really focus and say, okay, I want it to look like this. There's a distance there. That's that difference between sitting in the beanbag chair and going forward and progressing your work to what you aspire to. And that distance is just beyond your fingertips, because if you've done it already, you can do it again. And like Jolene said, I fought my signature style for years. In fact, I wasn't satisfied with it. So that's why I kept practicing, learning different lettering styles. And one day I picked up a different tool. Actually, it was, again, a color brush like this with real bristles. And I started writing in my natural handwriting and I went, oh, this feels so good. And there's certain letters that look good. I know I can do this again. And today is where I'm going to show you some exercises that may or may not get you there in your head because you have to feel it too. But it is going to unlock something that if you practice it today or in the future, you will start to see those styles come out. Yeah, go ahead, Jolene.
I'll just add. So I always use this fine one when I'm doing my graphic recording. And my counter spaces are always closed in.
Yeah.
And so all I have to do is write a little bit bigger. It was just that easy.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yep, exactly. So thank you for that. And we have some great stuff in the chat. I almost feel like I could do a whole bonus video just responding to what's in the chat, starting with Elise. She spent time practicing in lowercase, which she usually doesn't do. And that's wonderful because now you're so comfortable with the tool, but you're pushing yourself to do a different form, keeping in mind that uppercase has a lot more straight lines, lowercase has a lot more rounded lines. So you do have to slow down. So there's a lot to kind of unpack there when you're doing something differently. So yeah, I'm glad to hear Neelam saying a lot of unlearning. When you recognize what it is you have to unlearn or relearn, it may feel like you're being set back a little bit. But now having that conscious awareness, both mentally, because you have some tools, but then also physically, you can start to feel it. You're going to build that muscle memory even faster. So yes, hearing from Lori, going slower definitely led to being more consistent. She appreciated practicing and learning with different mark making tools. That's great. So I can tell you all day long to go slower, but it's subjective. How slow do you have to go? And I will say that when I took Jürgen Verkimp's lettering class, and I've taken it 3 times since 2019. So it's 3 times I've taken the exact same class in pressure release graphite. And there was 3 weeks there where I spent 3 hours a day practicing. And it made me crazy. Like mentally, it was like, this is awful. I didn't like it. I figured out ways to work with that little gremlin, work through it. And eventually I got to the point where I went, I can go this slow. I can make this perfect letter. And I recognize that I don't always work that way, and that's okay. And so just know that if you can get yourself to slow down to the point where you're like, this is almost painful how slow I'm going, and then speed back up, you're going to bring some of that awareness that you gained from going slow. And I know some of you, especially the visual practitioners, you're used to going so fast. You're like in 5th gear all the time. That's very hard to slow down. So if you get a chance to get to that Padlet, Neelam told her story about working in her mother language, which helped her slow down. And I've also suggested to work in languages that are different from yours. Now, her mother language was one that she had been separated from. So she's got a beautiful story. Yeah. Yeah. The hesitancy shows. So April's talking about slowing down for consistency, but hesitancy shows on the paper if I go slow. Exactly. Because we're looking very closely. Our anxiety is going higher because we're watching and judging as we go. And then that hesitancy will show up. We're also breathing. If I've missed this already, I will tell you that if any time you're doing a long straight line or even a slow line, if it's curved, whatever it is, breathing out is going to help, because when you breathe in, our shoulders, our lungs expand, our shoulders go up, our hands could potentially move. So yes, you are holding a lot of things in awareness now than you ever have before, because I've made you aware of them and you've focused and you've dedicated this time. So really well done. Yeah. So Mary's saying re-examining how the tool feels and trying different tools. This is the kinesthetic part. So glad that you're taking the time to do this. Yeah, so Gemma's saying, notice some weird transitions between letters. Example, her R, I remember that, depending on the next letter. And that's okay, because now, whether it's consistent or not, now you're aware of the relationship between letters. Now you can really play with the spacing and how you space those letters out. If you notice that you're connecting them, what happens if you purposefully practice spacing your letters out? Do you still connect them? Does it still make sense to connect them? So kind of pushing yourself to do things that don't seem like what you should be doing, but doing something that's opposite of what you might think. So if you're like, oh, they're all kind of squished together, stand back and go, can I do something that I haven't done before? Like space them out or change the slant. If you change the angle, also called the slant or the slope of the letter, will your connections or the relationships in your letters change? Yeah. Yep, exactly. Neelam's saying her T affects how those next letters connect. And again, ask yourself, are you writing for speed? Are you writing for legibility, your own feeling good about how clear and clean these are, or are you writing for someone else? And if you're writing for someone else and you have some small things like that, like certain letters connect and certain don't, that's going to slow down the reader and kind of confuse them a little bit, because it's like you've written a whole different glyph or a different type of letter. And so ask yourself, do you need to clean that up? I will say, as a visual practitioner, when I'm doing graphic recording, meaning I'm not part of the facilitation process, I try to keep my letters as consistent as possible. But when I'm facilitating, because I'm actually talking and working with the group and I'm having to work really fast, some of those things go out the window, and that's okay, because the important part is getting them down so that people can see what they've said, and they then have that to go by. Whereas sometimes when I'm purely just writing down what people are saying and I'm not part of the facilitative process, this is more of I'm creating a document that's going to be, or an I would say, an artifact for the group. It's going to have a different purpose, and it's going to maybe live in a different way. So be thinking about, again, about that context. What's the use and how are you using it? Yeah, good. All right. So Nora and Joe are both talking about spacing. You know, that's the last thing on the list because it's kind of the hardest thing to do. And you've got to get all those other things checked before you really work on that spacing. Yep. So how you space and how you consistently write will have unique characteristics. That's great. And Brandy, so let's celebrate that she's digitizing her lettering for slides in a course that she's teaching and really scrutinizing readability in a way that you've never done before. Well, good. I'm glad this class came just in time for you. And for those of you who are looking to digitize your letters to use as a font, meaning you can literally load it up in whatever program you're using, PowerPoint, Word, Illustrator, whatever, that one of the main things after you get done scrutinizing over those forms and getting them perfect is your optical width, which means determining where your optical width is, and I'm getting kind of down in the weeds, but that's going to be a key piece, is going to affect your spacing. And so even though I've created, I think, 3 fonts now, because there's so many different variations of lettering combinations, I can't possibly test them all. Even with my 80% testing that I've gone through, I will type out my font and I still see where there's spacing issues. And so getting that optical width, meaning how wide is your letter, but also how is it going to live in relationship to other letters, is really critical. So if you ever want to geek out on fonts and making your own font, I would really love that. Oh, she's not even turning it into a font, only turning them into vectors. Ah, okay. Well, then you have a little bit of, you can scooch things around a little bit. Yeah, good. So for those of you who do want to geek out on font making, that's a whole nother process. So yeah, great. So thank you for all the shares. I'm loving everybody else's work. Yeah. So, oh, Linda made a great observation, and writing in color is much better. I have a theory around that. Linda, can you say why you think you like it better in color? If you don't mind sharing.
When I thought about this, like I just picked up just a monoline, this color pen, and I realized that my writing was so much better. Mm-hmm. And I also realized that I used to do this all the time. I only would write in a green fine Sharpie. Everything I wrote was in that. I don't know if it's the Sharpie. I thought it was the feel, but I don't know. I don't know if it's the color. But
that's great.
Or
that's
if I
good.
take more time. I don't know. Yeah. I haven't figured that out. I still have the same problems with letters. My G's are inconsistent. My T's are not the same. Some I cross, some I don't. But overall, it's just more readable, and it's neater, and it looks the way I want it to look.
Yes, and so I think
don't know what that's about. Yeah.
I think that you saying that you don't know what that's about is actually a great observation, because you have some biases that are already in there. You always used to write with a green pen. It was all in, and you felt that level of confidence. So that level of confidence is there. But I believe, if I were to look at this objectively, that going from black to just about any color that's lighter than black is going to decrease the contrast, which means you're going to see less mistakes, which you're going to automatically feel better at. So whether you've used the tool your whole life or you've had experience in it and it's built up your confidence or not, just the fact that you've changed the color changes the contrast, which changes the way we're looking at our letter. Does that sound like that might be possible?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at a couple of words, and the problems with the letters themselves are not good.
Right. That has nothing to do with the color.
No, it just looks better to me.
Yes. Yes.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, that's totally true.
And Lisa's saying that she
Picture.
believes that there are happy colors, right? We
Yeah.
could look at a
Yes.
color and have a visceral experience. Some of you love red, some of you don't like red, right? And there's cultural connotations to color too. So I could literally talk for another 2 hours about everything that else is in this chat. I've captured the chat, so I'm going to come back and make another bonus video based on what it is that I don't get to today, but I want us to get writing, because the more we start getting too thinky about it, the harder it is to get back to writing and feeling good about it. So unless anybody has something else they just have to get out, unmute, feel free to unmute, but I'm going to change my camera, and then of course put all you want in the chat, because I'm going to keep addressing those as we go. But I love talking about these things because it helps us realize that we are truly in this together, and we're all experiencing many of the same things, or will experiencing them very soon. So just a quick review, these top 5 tips for consistency. When it came to form and shape, this was about, oops, let me use my other pen. This was really about finding that mother shape. So when you were looking at your exemplars, I wasn't asking you to copy them. I was looking at you to really see them and then notice, what are you writing compared to what you aspired to be? Then we have proportion tool for the job. We've heard a few people say this. If you have a bigger tool, that is really going to equate to a bigger letter so that you don't fill in those counter spaces. That's a big piece. And then your slope, that's going to be your slant, whether you're forward, straight up, or going backwards, just having that level of consistency. Your baseline, that's where your letters live. Is it straight? Is it curvy? Is it going up and down? Is it bouncing? And then of course the spacing, and we want to focus on optical spacing. So that's the space in between the letters, not mechanical spacing. This is about volume. And going in this order, it's like we can check off each one of these boxes and say, yeah, got it, got it. And then we're going to be more consistent. When we're more consistent, that of course is going to allow our work to be more readable to others. That's going to be important. But another piece is to have that consistency allows your style to come through. Yes, you're slowing down. Yes, you're adding a little bit of a facade to what you're doing because you're getting closer to where you want to be. But the reality is this is where you're going to start seeing. You can't create a style from having no foundation, and consistency is going to give you that foundation. So this whole first session was about creating the foundation. Some of you have already popped and noticed, you know, where your style is. And I will tell you that even if you already know your style by now, it's going to change and you're going to be able to grow from there. So I don't want to go through this very much, but I would love for you to journal either now or in the future, what's working well. Always focus on that positive part, because we can't work from a deficit. And then where do you need to focus? And I don't mean to say practice more, because I love what Brandy says about practice making progress, not perfection, but we do have to practice for performance. Meaning if you practice bad letters and you're just doing it quickly to get it over with, your practice over with, you're actually going to build bad muscle memory. So when we talk about focus, do you need to focus on form? Or do you have that now and you need to focus on rhythm? And when I say rhythm, I mean speed, meaning you can start out at a slow rhythm and then speed it up and go quickly. Do you want to focus more on your style, meaning if you haven't already found it yet? And this is something that could take a while. You might not get it in these 2 sessions, but these 2 sessions are going to give you the tools you need to get there. And then, of course, seeing those patterns in your work is important. So let's go ahead and write a new pangram. Take a moment for yourself to use that space for your new pangram. And this is in your comfortable tool, because I want you to just have a baseline today. This is a bit of a warm up. So again, nothing has to be perfect. So let me just give you a few moments to do that. Go at whatever speed is comfortable for you. And when you're finished, if you can look up, that gives me a clue that you're done writing your pangram. We're about a third of the way through. Good. All right, let's finish up our pangram. And I want you to be looking at the attributes. What is it about your, doesn't have to be just your letters, but looking at those top 5 tips, even if you don't get one of them, that's fine, but look at it and say, okay, what do we have here for attributes? If you want to start out really simply, you can say, what kind of tool you're using. I'm going to say monoline. I'm going to say that I've got a wavy baseline. And go ahead and write some of those attributes under there so that you can start to find some of the descriptive words. Okay. Here's where I'm going to ask you to be brave. You're going to take a picture of this and you can either go right to Padlet. Let me stop sharing so that I can give you the Padlet. And you're going to share this on Padlet. So you can either take a picture first and have it in your camera roll, or you can point your phone directly to the QR code. A little thing will pop up. Little yellow, maybe it's yellow on yours, it's yellow on mine, will pop up, and that's going to take you to the Padlet. And now you can post what you just wrote up there. Or if you have a practice page from this weekend, that's fine too. But the idea is that I'd like you to post that on Padlet, because when we go into breakout rooms, this is where we're starting to really look at other people's lettering and giving them feedback. And now you can add to your attributes list. What are other people saying about your lettering? Good. Welcome back. How was that exercise for you? I would just love to know. Was it fun? Was it scary? Was it insightful? Feel free to unmute or put that in the chat.
Yeah, I really liked it, so thanks. I was paired up with Neelan, and we talked about writing pangrams in a foreign language to really slow you down.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to try that one.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What
that's
else?
nice.
What are some key takeaways? What did you learn?
I was very pleased that she thought I had consistent spacing, because I feel myself that I have trouble with that. But when I looked at it, it was pretty okay. So
Good.
it's nice to
Good.
hear from someone else. Yeah.
Yes.
And now I got 2 times in a row last week, and now that my lowercase q looks a little bit strange. So might have to dive down into that.
Okay.
See if I want it to be remain strange, or if I want to change it. Yeah,
Good.
that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? How did you find that experience? Any key takeaways? Linda.
I thought it was great. And it was really interesting because Elise is a what do you call it, graphic recorder, and I'm a calligrapher. So looking at, like, right off the bat, I thought her writing looked great. What I thought was funny is I see my writing and I look at it going backwards slightly, and she saw it as up and down, and I looked at her writing and I saw it leaning forwards, and she was like, really? I thought it was up and down, right, Elise?
Right.
But it looked really good. Hers was very consistent. She told me that she could tell I was a calligrapher because my letters looked drawn, which I had not heard before. They don't look drawn to me. So I think it's really interesting to do this, to have somebody
Yeah.
else look at your writing.
Yeah.
It was fun. I liked it.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think what you pointed out was really important, is that when someone's looking at your work, it's probably good to know where they are coming from, what their lens is. So, and also keep in mind that if you ask your partner, your children, your parent, or a friend, they're going to come at it with a very, very different point of view, right? They're going to come in it with all kinds of biases, patterns, things that, how do we normally speak to each other? And so keep in mind that when you share your work with someone, be careful, first of all, of who you ask, be purposeful, intentional about who you ask, and understand where they're coming from. So I love that we're building bridges. I thought about making this class just focused for one group, but then I made it broader on purpose, because we do learn from so much from each other by looking at what's the use and the purpose. What's the use and the purpose for giving each other feedback? And so Lisa's asking, is there a way to retrieve the entire chat from the beginning? Yeah, absolutely. I save the chat, I'll format that, and I'll give that out to everyone. So that's right. Cross-pollination is magic. And because we're looking at this from different purposes, hopefully the visual practitioners aren't being intimidated by the wonderful form that calligraphers can do. And hopefully the calligraphers aren't intimidated by how fast the visual practitioners can go, because they not only can go fast, but they're also pulling in a lot of other skills like listening, understanding process, synthesizing, drawing, so many other things. And the calligraphers have incredible amounts of control. Yeah, over
Not
their
all of
form.
us.
What's that?
Not all of us.
No, now hold on a second.
Not in handwriting.
It doesn't feel that way, right? Yeah, it just doesn't feel that way. So again, even though some of you calligraphers might say, oh, that's not true, you have so much information that you are informed by the other kinds of studies that you're doing. I can tell by looking at what's on the Padlet who the calligraphers are, and the calligraphers can probably tell. But some of the other folks might not be able to see that because they don't know what your influences are, like italic, Roman hand, foundational, some of these other lettering styles. I can see how they're informed, some of them. But I will say, yes, some of the calligraphers here are showing up with their own personal handwriting because they may not be informed by other lettering styles, because again, the use is very different. So it kind of switches in the brain. So take a deep breath. Thank you for being brave and sharing with one another. That was fantastic. I am going to start an 8-minute timer, so please get ready to take a break, move around. This 8 minutes is plenty of time to get up, move around, grab something to drink. When we come back, we are going to take some of those letters that people liked or the ones that you like, and we're going to start finding some patterns and making some variations. Thank you everyone for taking a much needed break. I know that that was a lot of thinky stuff. So let's start doing making some letters, finding some common relationships, and let's dive into variations. So you'll want to have, like I said, all of everything that we talked about before, and bringing it all together. Let me share my screen so you see my desktop here. Let me lighten up just a tad. Okay, and so what I'd like you to do, referring to the conversation you just had on Padlet, would love for you to write down some letters that others may have liked. These don't have to be in alphabetical order. You can go back to the Padlet and find some of the letters that other people responded to. Maybe you typed them in the comments. Maybe you just talked about them. That's fine.
Shall we move to the different tool or use the one we have been?
I would love for you to use the one that you have been, because we're going to
Okay.
move to the tool in just a second. Yeah. So your favorite tool, and go ahead and write 5 to 8 or however many you feel above this thick line here. And again, they don't have to be in order. So you can go back and go in other orders, doesn't matter. And just go ahead and write some of those letters up there. Let's see. All right. And if you can't really think of anything, maybe, or if you look at your own and say, you know what, I really like this letter. Nobody said anything about it, but that's fine. If there's letters that you like, that's going to be important. The liking of your letters. These are really the stars of your show. These are the ones that people are saying stand out, and other people, and maybe you are even saying that you like these too. And then under those letters, what I'd like you to do is look for other like letters. So for instance, I'm going to just start with the N because it's the easiest. I'm going to be thinking about the H, the M, and I might even think about the U. And I'm going to look at these and say, okay, what is similar about these? What do they have in common? And how can I make them look a little bit more consistent or stylized? Here's where you get to make your decision. Is this about consistency or making them look really different and feeling like you are expressing yourself? And play with that. And then choose another letter and say, okay, what is like that letter? And I'm looking at my letter G going, I don't think there's anything like it. So I might just skip that one for now. But I might look at my letter T and say, well, if I flip it over, it's kind of like my letter F. And again, consistency or stylized. Play with that. And it might be uppercase, it might be lowercase. And as you're going through this, you might notice that you're kind of thinking in your head some of the other letters. So you might have to run through the entire alphabet and say, what else looks like that? So in your head, it's like a Rolodex. You're rolling through them and you're stopping and going, oh yeah, that's like that. And I'm going to give you 2 more minutes to work on this because I really want you to play. You're looking at the mother forms. You're looking about like letters. You're looking at how you might make them more consistent or more expressive.
Heather, did you say to use just the tool that we don't usually use, or do we go back and forth to others?
I would say start with the tool that you're most comfortable with, because
Oh.
we're not focusing on the tool right now. We're focusing on like
Oh.
letters, consistency, expressive. If you're like, I got this, and you want to keep going and you want to try your other tool, that's fine too.
No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
That's okay. Yeah, I totally get it. There's some people that are going to be bored and some people that want the really focused practice time. So yeah, there's really no wrong way.
Okay.
But definitely start with where you always feel comfortable. That's just a great place to start. Then it won't feel so
Nice.
wobbly. Yeah.
What would you say the S, what would be some sister letters or brother letters for that?
That's a great question. That's why I always say it's the tough letter, because there aren't a lot of letters. Does anyone have a similar letter? Did you identify? I just went with different styles, but did anybody identify what a sister letter would be for the letter S?
I think, Heather, your G to me is a little bit like, it's different from an S, but it has some of the similar curves in it.
Yeah, that's a great noticing. Good.
Nice.
Good. Yeah. So I'll then
G,
take, what's that?
Your G to me reminds me of a duck.
It does. Yes. And oftentimes, and I just remember this when Lloyd Reynolds taught the italic G, and I can't do it right now, but when he taught the italic G, he turned it into a goose. And so oftentimes, the italic G will look like a goose. Yeah. And if, for those of you who don't know Lloyd Reynolds, he actually taught at Reed College and taught. He is the predecessor to so many thousands of other calligraphers in this country. So a little shout out to Lloyd Reynolds. Good. And so what we're doing here again is we're looking for those like letters. We're looking for consistency. And then if you start to varying them up, notice what that feels like between readability and expressibility. So this is a practice that you can go to over and over again. And the reason why I do this in a vertical fashion, this is so important, because when we write normally left to right, and you say, oh, I want to do these letters, and maybe you write them vertically and then go left to right, you actually get into the habit of looking at your old letter while you're writing your current letter and might be thinking about the next letter, which is fine. However, it changes your speed when you go vertically, and you can almost think about them a little bit more independently without having that peripheral vision happening left to right. So I'm breaking a bit of a habit here in the way that we write so that we can start looking and practicing in a different way. So there is a method to this madness. And that's the why I do this. Now, this didn't take very long for us to do. And so if you want to come back to this exercise, I highly recommend it because it's very helpful, especially in finding variations. So any questions before we move on? I see a hand. Neelam, yeah.
Do you have any like quick tip for maintaining the dash of the T? Because I feel like I'm always struggling between my T looking like a plus or a cross. So
yeah. Yes. So I love that question. And a lot of this comes down to how much control do you have with your starts and stops? If you're, no matter what you're writing with, whether it's a monoline, a brush, or whatever, if you're starting to get these wispy looking things happening here, you are drawing in the air. So you're either drawing before you hit the paper or after you hit the paper, and you're losing control. And so this is why when I teach sign painter or brush lettering or any of those lettering styles, I'm saying have very confident starts and stops. And so that can answer one of your questions. The other question is, when I cross my T's, I have 3 different types of crossings. Okay, so if I have some T's down here, I can have straight, I can have a little bit of a curve, I might have one that kind of flies up. Again, I don't have a lot of control about what direction that goes. The taper, that turned out really great, but I can tell you if I did it 10 more times, they'd all look different. So I try to stay away from this one. This is the one that I don't do. And then another one that takes a lot of practice and control that's similar to this is where you come out and then come back. And so that little bitty flourish that's coming back, that's called a return. That has got to be purposeful. But again, it takes a lot more control to do these two than these two, which have purposeful starts and stops. Does that help?
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up on that. Do you have any, like, the height at which I'm crossing my T?
Yes.
Like how low or high? Because if it's in the center, it looks like a plus sign. And that's the kind of T I'm writing, like just the straight line, because my L is L, my F, they're just a straight line. So,
and that is an excellent question. So if you were practicing, if you don't have to, but if you were practicing with some guidelines and you have your baseline, your cap, or your ascender line, this is your X height. And that X is where any letter that doesn't have a ascender or descender lives, right? So when you go to write your letter T, and let me find another, well, I'll just do it in red. When you write your letter T, normally, now this is not handwriting, this is calligraphy, or this could be handwriting actually, but your natural handwriting might not do this. Your T is going to begin between your X height and the ascender line. So it's not going to go all the way up. And wherever your X height is where your T is going to cross. So that cross is going to happen at the top of any of your other letters that live within that X height. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps.
Because if you're going too high or if you're going too low, it's
That's
not going to
exactly
look
what's happening. Yeah.
Yep. It's not going to look consistent with this. But again, this is also going back to what's the use, what's the context? Is this about consistency, readability, or expression? And of course, you can play with that variation, but ask yourself, does it work?
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, that's helpful, because I didn't have to think about this when I was doing my normal cursive, because it just flows and there's no issue. But with print, when I want to move to print, it sort of like starts looking like a cross, and that's not what I want. So yeah, that's right. Helpful. Thanks.
Excellent. And Gemma was also asking about the X. And so whenever we are writing the letter X, notice what happened to make sure that I have that X either in the middle or slightly higher. I want my starts and stops to be parallel to each other. And that even works when I'm going at a slant. That'll still happen in the middle as long as they're parallel. The stops and starts are parallel. Good. And congratulations, Gemma, for finding your signature style. She just popped. Okay. All right. Yeah. So good. Gemma's giving April kudos because she must have seen something in her style. So that's great. All right. Ludi's asking for the numbers 2 and 5. So let me know, Ludi, what you mean by, what are you looking at for the numbers? Because I know we haven't talked about numbers yet.
I was thinking about them being like the letter S.
Yes.
Having suggestions for what's like the letter S.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm going to start looking at my numbers now. And that is something we don't, well, some of us don't write a lot of numbers. Some of us do. We haven't even talked about numbers. So you can pull that into your practice at any time. But numbers, sometimes we get to a number if you haven't written them a while and it's like, uh-oh, what do my numbers look like? Well, we know what numbers look like. What's helpful is to go back to your attributes. So anytime you want your numbers to match your style, go back to the attributes and say, can I use these same attributes? Can I look at this exercise here and throw my numbers in the mix? So thank you for that. Excellent. All right. So now we've got a list of common letters, and that's going to give us a great baseline to create a new exemplar. And so this is where I want you, I know you've been doing pangrams and that was fantastic. You've really been focused on forms. Now you can go back to any of your practice pages, any of what we did so far today, especially this last exercise, if that's helped you in any way, either think about consistency or variations. And I'd like you to write a new exemplar. This can be uppercase, lowercase. This is in your comfortable tool. And here you can go slower because you are trying to set a new baseline that is very intentional and purposeful. So you can choose to do all uppercase and then lowercase or bring them together. It's completely up to you. But what you're doing is you're creating an exemplar that's not about anyone else but you. And it's that mix between what you find aesthetically pleasing and what you know you can be consistent with. And if you get one not quite right, you can go ahead and write it again. Maybe even make a mark, like crossing one out. This is what having a secondary tool can help. But go slow, consider that form. Take your time to make this new exemplar. If you have to write it more than once, then note that, maybe put a cross out of the ones you don't like. If you have to write it more than once, then say, you know what, I'm going to come back and really focus on this letter later, but don't let it hang you up for your other letters, from your other letters. Just keep going.
Heather, Yeah. I remember you saying that if you do your letters consistently, but you have one that isn't, it's a total like stopper, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
And I know that I do that. I do that with my F's. I do that with my G's. And in writing an exemplar, should I add like the different styles, or do I have to pick one? And is that something I have to do, like change to make them all the F's the same way or all the T's the same way?
So this is a great question. Thank you so much for asking this, Linda, because here's my question to you. Would you have a readable exemplar or would you have an expressive exemplar? So can you make a choice? Like, I wouldn't want you to put 5 out there, but if you're like, I got 2, I write it this way and this way, I think that's fine. This is just for you.
Okay.
But if you say, actually, I can write this 10 different ways, then decide for yourself, is this going to be about consistency and readability, or is this about being expressive? And just choose 1, maybe 2, but I wouldn't do any more than that.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Great question. Because we don't want to confuse ourselves for this next part, because I'm setting you up for another exercise. And thank you all for trusting me in this process. For those of you who do trust me, I know some of you still have you're still wondering about me. That's fine. I'll give you another 2 minutes to finish up so you know how much time you have. Again, this isn't calligraphy and it's not perfect, but it is a balance between what's consistent in your form and how you're expressing yourself?
For me, it's hard. My G and my 9 always look very much alike.
Your
So,
G and your 9?
yeah.
Well, I don't know that you're going to put a G and a 9 at the same time
No,
in a
it's
word. So I think you're safe.
From context, you usually get it. But yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I'll dive into that. Next week, I have a week of leave. So, and since my cast is off, I now have a brace, but I can't go walking. I can't go hiking yet.
Yeah,
So
don't go wild. Use lettering as an excuse to stay still.
It means that I have more time to read and write letter when next week. So
excellent. Good.
Quick question, Heather, about your lowercase b and d.
Yes.
Do you do the strokes in the same order for your b and your d?
What do you mean? Say more about that.
So do you do like a downstroke and the circle?
No, I write from left to right.
Yeah, yeah.
So even though I break it, even though those are similar shapes,
yeah,
they definitely, I always write from left to right. The only time I can think that I'm not writing from left to right could be when I'm writing my letter X, because I tend to go this way. So I'm not starting up here and going that way.
Yeah.
That's the only one that I can think of. But yeah.
Because I do it the same as you just demonstrated, and I'm really liking my B, but I find I can't get my D to look like a cousin. It looks like it's a different, yeah, those look much more similar.
Right. So what I did there was I was going faster and I moved this, in this case, my stem was too far in. So I had to consciously think to pull that stem out just a little bit to be more similar.
Yeah.
Slowing down. Yeah. So slowing down to make something match is where we're focusing on form and we're building that muscle memory. And then here's where it's so important to stop, pause, notice, and then address it, right? So we want to go back and say, does something here need to be addressed? So that was a great insight that you just asked. Good. All right. So I'd love for you to finish up your exemplar, uppercase, lowercase. You don't have to write the numbers, only if you had time. And now I want you to pull out your stretch tool, the tool that you're also going to write with. Now I'm going to give you a couple of hints here. And we're going to do the same thing. You're going to write the exemplar again. But before you do, you might want to just do a quick test with the tool. Hey, what does this tool like to do? Does it like to do thicks and thins? What kind of line quality does it make? I mean, you may not have used this in a while. So you kind of want to also test, is your nib pretty strong or is it softer? If you're going to a broad edge tool, you've also got some variations in line on that tool as well. And so you might want to play with, okay, am I going to try to keep it pointed in the same direction? Am I going to purposefully change direction as I write? This is going to get more drawn in a way because you're flipping and using the nibs in different ways. Are you using more and less pressure on purpose? Or are you just going for it? And there's no wrong answer here. But here's what I want you to do. At about the same speed that you were up here, maybe a little bit slower, I want you to go ahead and write the same lettering style. So you're going to have to go up and look at the form and say, okay, I'm going to try to write it. Does it show up the same way or does it look vastly different? And you might write a few letters and then maybe change up the way you're doing it. Like, do I want to keep them all consistent or do I want to do some thicks and thins? It's completely up to you.
Heather?
Yes.
I should have been paying attention, but when you do your small Q, let's say, or do you do the straight line first and then add the oval? Or do you
Nope.
do the oval?
I'm always writing from left to right. So
Okay.
on a cue, I would do the oval and then the straight line.
Okay.
But don't let that hang you up just because I do it. Because if you already have a pattern set up and it works for you, you may not want to change it. That's completely up to you.
Well, I've been doing it that way, but I find I seem to have better control on what the oval looks like if I do the little tail first.
Ah, okay. And you might also have to do the oval and then pause so that it's not one straight
Yeah.
line, and then come in and put it where you want. And that is such a great noticing, because what you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself what feels comfortable, and then what looks good. So what is aesthetically pleasing? And I've said this a couple of times, but some of you, this is the kind of thing where you could probably hear it 100 times and you'll hear it like maybe the 79th time I said it, right? Instead of the first time. And that is, comfort comes first, because that's where we're always going to land when we stop thinking about it, and it's in our muscle memory. And aesthetically is what we're striving for. It's what we want to get to. So as you're using your new tool, also notice, is the tool bigger or smaller? Is that having an effect on how I write? Is it faster? Is it slower? How is that making an impact? And again, keep pausing and noticing what's happening with your letters. And when I say pause and notice, there's a physical noticing while you're writing it. And then there's a visual, and I know I said don't judge, discern. When you see it visually, are you saying that worked, or I need to take another shot at it? And if you say that worked, ask yourself what worked about it. What did you like? If you have to take another shot at it, try to do it in one shot. Meaning, if you didn't like the way it looked, go ahead and cross it out, try it again. But if you find that you have to do it 2 or 3 more times, then stop, come back to that letter at another time. Because you don't want it to hang you up. This is the part in the process where you can get, again, too thinky. Can we just do good enough? Press on. Okay, and I'm going to give you another 2 minutes to finish that up. If you are out of that time, then go ahead and answer the bottom part. What worked using this new tool, and how did the tool influence a change? And this is a great place to just take a couple of notes about that, because in 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, if you find this piece of paper, you're going to say, what was I doing? What was I thinking? So this is a great time to go ahead and write that down. Excellent. I love what you're saying in the chat. So the first tool was a monoline, second was a flex, automatic default to pressure on flex. Yep. So if you're used to using a flexible tool, that's great. I did the same thing here, but I used the side of my marker and pretty much wrote the same way. So for me, it had a similar shape and form, but the brush felt more expressive. I felt like I could do a bunch of different things with this tool that I couldn't just do with the monoline. I love that Julian's saying it raised his awareness even more about each stroke. Yes. So what happens is we get used to what this tool can do, and then we got to go back and go, oh, this is going to feel differently when we write it with this new tool. So that's great. Yep, you can add thicks and thins because we have a variation. If you're going from monoline to a different type of tool, you've got new variations of line to play with. It may slow you down a lot. Yep. So if you haven't experienced slowing down, this exercise might force you into that. And the letter variations may not work. And it might be because of the way you're pointing the tool, how you're holding the tool. So if you feel very confident with a brush nib or a wedge nib, even though you've been using monoline, if you're like, no, it's not that much of a stretch. If you have command over these tools, then what happens is you kind of know how to point it. You kind of know which part of it to use. There's an anatomy to these. And if you don't, it might come out not like you had thought. And so what that means is, and my advice to you is find out after writing with this new tool, is it better to always point the tip of the nib, whether it is a brush or a wedge, in a certain direction the whole time you're writing? Or does it need to change depending on what you're writing? For instance, you might want a really thick mark or really thick line. So how you point that nib might need to change depending on which angle that line is. So that's a whole nother level of getting to learn to know these tools and also learning other lettering styles with those. So that's great. And Neelam's saying that a mid-sized chisel tip edge gave you more controlled downward strokes, distinct starts and stops. That's great because now you're consciously looking at this. So I want to talk about a little bit why I do this exercise, just to give you some context and why it helped me find my signature style. Now, when I first started out as in my lettering year and learning calligraphy, I found the different tools really challenging. And so I would always go back, honestly, I would always go back to my pencil because my pencil was my favorite tool. It never let me down and I could erase it, right? So this was my favorite tool. And then Neuland, even though I learned a bunch of how to use these different tools, the brush, the wedge, I mastered these and I came up with lots of different lettering styles for visual practitioners to be able to use these different types of tools. And then Neuland came to me and said, look, no one likes this one. This is the fine one art. It's long, it's got a big bristle. And when it folds, once it gets a fold in it, it's hard not to get that fold in it. A lot of people like to draw with it because they get very varying lines. So illustrators love the tip of it. But people were coming to me saying, I can't letter with it. It's impossible to letter with. And so I thought there's got to be a lettering style in there. And there's about 7 that I have found in this particular tool. But what I had to do was I had to go to this really floppy brush tool and write with it, even when it felt awkward. I had to play with it. And then I said, okay, now I can grab this tool and I can do Neuland hand with it. I can do brush lettering with it with some varying degrees of success because that's tough. And then I came up with a lettering style. Some of you may already know this. If you don't, that's fine. And it's called Twinkle. And I came up with this because it has so many variations and can be so much fun to play with. And it's based on your own handwriting. So I will give everybody a copy of Twinkle after this, because then you can play with it and you can use different tools with it. And if you're still a little afraid of the brush marker, especially this one, it's a great tool to use with it because of the levels of variation and forgiveness and wonkiness. Like, this is where you get to really be expressive. And it was through this tool that I found my signature style, that I popped, that I went, oh my gosh, it's in there. And it took me years to try to figure out what it was. But going to such an uncomfortable, unknown place and come back forced me to find something redeeming about this particular tool. And so I taught Twinkle. Everybody, I won't say everybody, some people didn't like it, but a lot of people liked it because it was familiar, because they could use their handwriting. And so I'll share that with you. But the reason why I shared that particular tool is because if we're choosing a tool that we're like, that was pretty comfortable, if you found your signature style in it, great. But if you're still like, I still don't see it, then you might have to push yourself a little bit further out of your comfort zone and use a stretch tool that's really not like anything that you've done before. So any questions about that, or anybody feeling a little discomfort around going a little too far? What happens? And just know that you have a safe place to work from, because you've already built up so much consistency and uniformity in the exercises that you've already done. So that's why I bring you to this point. And this new tool, whether it's really similar or really different, might be where some of you then discover your signature style. So any feedback about those two, anything anybody else wants to add, you feel free to unmute, because I know we've got some great stuff in the chat. But
Heather, I have a technical question about the type of brush pen that I'm using.
yeah,
This is called the brand is GUAN GNA.
GUANGUA. Does anybody know this brand?
GUAN GNA.
Oh, GNA. Wow. Do you know where it's made?
It looks like it's Asian, and I don't know if it's from China or Japan.
Okay. I will say this, that a lot of nibs are made in Japan. All of the nibs that I'm aware of that come from Neuland, everything's made in Germany for them. So let's say it's regardless of what it is, because a lot of nibs are made in Japan and then sold to other brands. Can you hold it up for me?
Sure.
So I can see the actual nib? Yeah.
Let me take that. And that's the nature of my question. This is almost an acrylic or something. It's pretty firm. It's not.
Yep. So it's very similar to the Fine One Flex. This is
okay. That's what I needed to know. Okay.
Yep. So that nib is and that's also for others in the room that might be interested. If you have a Tombow Fudenosuke, it's also very similar to that. So what it is, it's a very small nib, and before you use it a lot, it's very it can be very strong at the bottom 2/3, and then the top third has some flex. After you use it for a while, it's going to become more flexible. Like this area, just the bottom part is going to be stiff, and then this becomes flexible, and the nib starts to get a little bit more rounded as you go. So like a good pair of shoes that you're sad that they've gone too far, there's going to be a sweet spot. At first, it's going to feel too stiff, and then it's going to feel too soft. And so just know that I don't know if that particular pen would allow you to change the nib. You can change the nibs in the Fine One Flex, but just know that, just notice that your lettering might change as you go. The lines might become thicker, and it might change a little bit. So just notice that. And then also notice what size you're writing at. So size is going to be a big piece. Did you find that you needed to go bigger or smaller?
It has about 4 sizes in this line, and I did have to adjust it.
Yep. And so those 4 sizes are based on your pressure, right? And what part of the marker are you using? Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm saying is there's a broad, a fine, an extra fine, and a medium.
Oh, okay. So you're saying the pen comes in different sizes.
Right.
Okay. Well, even within those sizes, they still have different levels of line depending on how much of the side you're using, how much of the tip, You can put more pressure on the side. You can put less pressure on the tip. Great. Okay, so way to go, everyone, for pushing yourself. Now let's do sort of, now this might feel like we're speeding up because we kind of are. We're going to look at some variations. And this is where those of you that are like, okay, I'm already bored. I was bored after 2 minutes in the class. I want to vary it up because sometimes I feel that way. Now we can play with what are the different variations we can add to our actual lettering styles. So if you have a pencil or a differing color, go ahead and make yourself a highway, right? So we've got our baseline down here. We have our ascender. We can put another light line down here for our descender. And then this middle line, this dotted line, that's our X height. And that X height, you can go a little bit lighter at the top if you want in the bottom. That X height can change. So what do I mean by that? When I have an X height that's right in the middle, my ascenders are going to go high. The letters that don't have an ascender or a descender are going to live within that X area. The middle of my G is going to live there, but the descender is going to go low, and I'll go in a little bit. Actually, I'll go way in so that you can see this because I know some of you are working on smaller screens. Again, there's my ascender. And I said this before, you notice that the dot of the I is right in the middle. The T is going to start. The cross is going to be at the X height. And so that T is going to start in the middle between the X height and the ascender too. Does anybody know why the T is lowered? This is just a fun fact. Why it's in the middle compared to like the F and the other ascenders. When Guggenheim, no, wasn't Guggenheim. Who invented the movable press? Gutenberg. When Gutenberg invented the movable press, he didn't want the T to get confused with the F. So he made it smaller. So that's just a little fun fact. So if you wanted the X height to be higher, here's your variation. Your X height is higher. Your ascender stays the same, but your X height is higher. So your letters become taller. And then you have to decide, do they stay the same width? A little bit higher. And notice I'm crossing it higher. Do they stay the same width or do they get wider? And again, we'll talk about that as well. You can play with your width.
Just play
So
with the
now
X.
you're making a higher X height. Yep.
X height is lower and higher.
And then you do a low X height. Look how little that X is. But look, my ascenders stay the same. The area in which, and now I might lose my counter spaces here because my tool is too big. But now, again, my X height is really small or low, but the ascenders, the descenders stay the same. And the variation, is where that T lands, right? So X height is a really fast way, because you can use the same exact tool that's in your hand to change and vary up your letters. You can also decide if you want your letters to be wide or if you want to keep them narrow or regular. And we already know that our slope or our angle. So these are other variations. We talked a little bit about the baseline. You know, are we writing on a straight baseline? If you were in session 1, we talked about, do the letters follow the curve or do they stay straight up and down? And then the baseline goes up and down. So the question is does the letter go like this? Or does it go up and down? So they can go even higher like that, straight, or does it curve? So there's some variations with that. The next thing is rotation. So if you think about your rotation being like a dial, meaning which way does it point, then you can play with that slope sort of in the same way we did with our baseline. So if you have a letter R and it's just straight, if you rotate it this way, is that R going to have a stem that goes that way? So it's really kind of based on your stems. That's where you're going to see it the most. Or does it get rotated the other way? And what can be fun about that, and this is where you really see it in my, when I write my pangram, is that I am constantly rotating, and even I might just break that baseline, my idea of which way is it going. I'm literally writing the letters to rotate in ways that I feel that they live nicely in relationship to each other, regardless of what a rule may be. So I'm playing with a baseline, I'm playing with rotation at the same time. What happens now when I change size? And so this is one of my favorite things to do. Size can be done a couple of different ways. Again, you can do wide, narrow, but you can also literally just make it bigger. So size can play a factor. So if I might do my letters, I might mix uppercase, lowercase. I might play with the sizes. One of my favorite things to do is all of my vowels might be bigger or wider. So I might go, my other consonants might be normal size, and then I might have really wide letters in other places, because especially for some reason with the letter O, good, or to, I see the sound because it's a vowel. So it's kind of fun to just make your vowels wide. All the other letters can be the same. And now you've got this new style that you've literally just made the vowels wider. By making them wider or bigger, you're making that sound stand out. And so if someone's reading this as like reading it in their head, like the way they would say it, but not out loud or out loud, they're actually focusing on those letters because they're bigger. Okay. So what questions do you have about variations? That was a really quick overview. Or what would you add? So this is time to play. Not right now, but what I'm saying with this exercise, you can really play with it. You can go back to your either known pangrams or new pangrams and play with the X height, the wide and narrow slope, your baseline, your bouncing, your rotation, and your size. And so now I want us to speed up. And this is something that I think is going to be important for those of you who like to work slow, and for those of you who work fast. This is where I'm going to encourage you not to judge yourself. Stay curious, because you're coming in fast again, but with different information, and it might feel wobbly or it might feel more comfortable. And so we're just going to go really fast, and you might speed up as you go, and you might want to decide, am I going to go with my comfort tool or am I going to do my stretch tool? Doesn't matter. It's totally up to you. And I want you to write your A through Z, either in uppercase or lowercase, not both, just one or the other. And I just want you to go really fast, and probably so fast that you cannot think about or really notice. Maybe you're noticing how you're feeling, but you're not doing it so slow that you can actually think about, oh, what was that? And then feel it again when you write your second set. We're not going for look, we're going for speed. If you went really fast, then go to your other tool, whether it was the more comfortable one or not. Now you're really going to notice because you've sped up. Again, you're going for speed. What happens when you speed up? For me, as soon as I speed up, the form goes out the window. That's the first thing that goes out the window. Then my spelling goes out the window. So you might have like missed a letter or got them out of order, which is totally fine. And then my baseline, my spacing. Now I made all my letters kind of touch in my uppercase, but then I got to my lowercase and that got all the spacing got a little wonky. But everything that we've tried to be consistent with changes because we've sped up. And I wanted you to experience that. There is going to be a speed where you can speed up, but you don't feel wobbly, but you can still be consistent and you can stay focused. And that is a lot of things to carry at the same time. So there's another part of this, and that's your tool. Notice how your mark making tool moves across the page. Does it work at a faster speed? Or does it kind of fall apart? Does the nib get in the way of itself? Are you going too fast? Like sort of like, do your legs go real fast, but your feet can't keep up, so you trip kind of thing? Does it feel like you're tripping across the page? Is it still the right tool? Is it still the right paper? There's faster papers. There's papers with tooth. There's papers that are smooth. There's papers that are waxy or slick. And can you still focus on those purposeful starts and stops? Remember to go fast on the straightaways. You may have to slow down a bit on the curves. And then notice, even when you go fast, what letters, and you could put a check mark if you want, what letters still work and what letters fall apart. So the letters that fall apart for me, I'm going to put an X over or under, wherever it's going to make sense. And then I'm going to put a check mark for the ones that work. Right? And just notice that. And that is then a gauge to say, when I get to that letter, especially if you're working in a style or one of your star letters, the ones that are really good, make sure you nail those, because you only have to get most of them right for it to look good. So get the ones right that count. All right. What did that feel like speeding up? Feel free to unmute, because I know we're getting on the final stretch here.
It's not too bad. I'm happy with it. maybe because I do sketchnoting and some graphic recording where you need to be fast, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
Keep it. This is what I did fast.
Good.
And then this is what I did slow.
Good. Good. And so there might not be much of a difference there. And that's true for some, but not true for all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. So this is just one more exercise. One more exercise. That's all that is. Good. Anyone else going fast? Francesca.
Yeah, I thought my letters look better with going fast. Like I just seem to I did it with my comfort one. I find that the other, I'm going slow and then whoops, things get a little shaky. And this is like, no way, just get in there.
That's right.
I think my spacing turned out way better and it was more enjoyable.
Okay. That's what I was hoping you were going to say. Something about how it felt in terms of an emotional feeling, because there is a speed that we are happy with. Right? Someone mentioned before that when I know someone's going to look at my work, it kind of like makes it not as good, right? Because we're thinking about that. But how are we feeling? And if we're writing faster or if we're writing slower, I mean, there's going to be a speed in which we feel comfortable, but that we actually enjoy. And if you can find a speed that you enjoy and you can build the muscle memory to be consistent, and you can be expressive, right? So sometimes we get more expressive lines when we work faster because we're not going to be slow and purposeful with our pressure or our form. So something new is going to come out of it. And so that's why after you go fast, and you can do this a number of ways, you can turn on a metronome, something that musicians use, click, 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 start at the heartbeat. I think it's like 72 beats. That's slow. Click, 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 then speed it up to 90, click, 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 speed it up to 120, click, 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 click. And you'll notice that the downstrokes or wherever you make major strokes are going to speed up. You can do it very mathematically that way. If you'd like to be a little bit more zen about it, then look for music that have different beats per second. So look for those kinds of music, and you can just do a search for song that's 72 beats per second or 90 beats per second, but 75, 90, 120, go any
per minute.
faster than that, it gets crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Jessica.
per minute. It's BPM, beats per
BPM.
minute.
Yep,
Yeah,
beats per minute. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My husband
That-
used to make hardcore music, and that was all around 180 BPM, really fast.
There you go. That's very, very fast.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And when in my level up your lettering, I have like an experience class. It's like the advanced class that I teach in retreats. We talk about rhythm, and we really get into the beats per minute, and we use music and things like that to do that. So that's great. Good to see that. All right. So we're in the final stretch. And here's where I want you to go to page 5. And I'm not going to have my camera on because I don't want you to be influenced me by anything whatsoever. I want you to try your hand at a pangram. And you can, again, one more time, any pangram. It could be a new one. It could be the one you love. And I want you to post this on Padlet. And I want you to then do something new with this one. Either change the tool, use one of the variations, but I want you to try something new. And I want you to post it on Padlet, and then you're going to rate it, comparing it to your original one. But this is going to be your new baseline. And I'm only going to give you 5 minutes because we're going to run out of time, and I have a few more things that I want to do at the very end. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes. So let's keep it quiet for 5 minutes so that we can all work. And then after 5 minutes, then I'll speak and answer any questions.
Heather? Would you mind putting up the QR code again for Padlet? Thank you.
All right. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone, for going through this process with me. This is so, so important. And I just want to say thank you for lettering with me. We still have about 15 more minutes. So I've got a couple of other things, but can we just celebrate for a moment of all the exercises that we went to? That was a lot. And some of you probably held a lot of tension while you did it. Some of you may have really enjoyed the process of exploring and learning about it. Some of you may have popped. I know I saw that in the chat a couple of times, and some of you might still be working at it and maybe even struggling. So I'm going to put this in the chat, but I also want to read it to you because I want you to be thinking about how you use your letters, no matter who you are or how you plan to use them. What do you need more of from this moment forward? This is a great thing to write down or to consider. Do you need to practice consistency in form? Do you need to analyze and really explore those letter forms? Do you need something different? Do you need to try different tools and see what comes up? Were there some aha moments that happened when you did that with your stretch tool and maybe you want to take it further? Do you really need to loosen up if you've been too tight? And get expressive with your letters, maybe work at different speeds. These are great things to write down what you're going to do next or do differently or do more of the same. And that means getting your calendar out and making some time for it. Or what if you need feedback from me? Or if you've been copying somebody's handwriting, you might need therapy because there are some psychological risks to copying other people's handwriting. Not so much machine-made fonts, but if you picked out a handwriting font, that could be a little challenging. So I kind of mean it, but I kind of don't. So be careful about, who you're trying to copy or trace. Do you need space to do other things? You're like, I need a break from this. This was intense, and maybe come back to it. You've got all of the exercises in the handouts. You've got the recording. I'll give you access to that. And also know that I am here to help you however you need. So from this moment going forward, if you want to keep posting on Padlet for feedback, please do. I'll keep looking at that from time to time. I get a notification when they pop up, so I try to get to those as quickly as I can. Do you want to learn more lettering styles? And if you need help on that, on where to start, please feel free to reach out to me. I can point you towards other calligraphers, other graphic recorders. If you need mentoring, things like that. If you want to learn things from me, if you don't know what you want, then let's do a quick one-to-one, or let's just do it via email. Yeah. So if you didn't get through the bonus video, don't worry. It's always going to be there as well. And where I went to go find my font sheet, that's in the bonus video as well. So that's all in there, Lisa. That's great. All right. If you have any more questions that I didn't cover in the bonus video, I'd love to answer those now. So feel free to either unmute
Heather,
or ask. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I'm like, this is perfect for me, these 2-day sessions. You know, I
Okay.
like even just like the longer term ones, it's hard to commit.
Yeah.
But I find the 2 for 2.5 hours is a really nice way to extract something and
Yeah.
move forward. What else have you got on the go that may be coming up that's similar? You know, I like the gentleness of this.
Yeah.
And I still feel like I got a lot out of it. So I'm just wondering, what else have you got on your cooking? What
Yeah.
else is
Well,
on the stove?
thank you for asking. And I did not pay her to say this, but I do have some words up here that I want to throw up. That was my thing that I was going to say. No matter where you are in your lettering journey, here's what I do have coming up. So lettering with pencils, this is for anyone who just has a love for pencils and also wants to slow down, because I'm going to be teaching pressure release graphite. So this requires really slowing down. So for those of you who need to be forced to slow down, this is a great way to do it. I am also sending out some new paper, so everyone will get something in the mail that's fun. And then that's going to be happening August 1st. There's a class called Dancing in the Dark. Now, this is for calligraphers, but any non-calligraphers are certainly welcome to join us. This is a class with Sharon Zoigan that I'll be hosting. We are designing this specifically for you to play with the bones, meaning you have, whether you found your signature style already or not, you have created some actual bones to work with. You're more consistent now than you were than when you began. And so Dancing with the Dark is going to happen September 23rd on the fall equinox, and on November 1st, Samhain. This is not a spiritual class, but it is an experiential class. And so if you've ever taken a class from Sharon Zoigan, you may understand what that means. If you haven't, Sharon has I've hosted 2 classes with her. The first was rhythmic italic, and it goes so well with anybody who's taken this class and wants to get into the rhythm and have their letters be both more readable and expressive. And we're also going to be diving in. I think it's going to mainly be about capitals, probably working on dark pieces of paper, but dancing with our letters. And so it's going to be a really interesting class, something we've never done before. Now, for the visual practitioners, I've taught Level Up Your Lettering for since 2000, and I want to say 2018 was the first time that I offered it. This is for visual practitioners who really want to learn the hierarchy of letters and all the different lettering styles that go with that. So this is literally a formula that you can learn for your work as a graphic or a visual practitioner, graphic facilitator. So if you're a calligrapher, chances are you're not going to really get into letter up or level up, because it's very marker based and it's very technical and in relationship to what we do as visual practitioners. And then your lettering year, Make It Your Lettering Year, is a year-long class of 52 prompts. And every week you get a new prompt but actually you have access to all of the prompts, and you have that for a lifetime. So I'll follow up with an email with all of that. But I do want to say, what are some of your next best steps? And that is, first, go make. Stop practicing in this moment and make something, even if it's a Post-it note of your favorite quote to put on your computer. Or if you want to post something online, if you want to do something, just make something. Take a break from practicing and make something. Also, find something you want to focus on next. Remember the learn, do, thank that I gave you in the first session. Go back and look at that and decide what you want to focus on next and practice for 3 weeks. I know that seems like a long time, but studies have shown that if you practice something for 21 days, it will become a habit. And if you create time, even if it's 3 to 5 minutes a day to practice something, you will gain from that experience. And then seek feedback. You're welcome to reach out to me anytime. Post it on the Padlet. We all learn from that. I think some of you have already said you're enjoying seeing what other people are saying and maybe what I'm saying on the Padlet. You've given me so much to look at. Can I just share my screen for a minute and say, wow, have you added a lot just in today? So these are what came before today, because I can see all of my reactions. And then, so we're not even half of this. Look at everything that you've put up just today. And so I want you to go back and look at this new pangram and compare that to the first baseline that you had. Rate it. Do you feel better? Great. Tell all your friends how great this class was. If you don't, tell me and I'll make it right. I'll work with you, okay? Because I want you to feel good. And if you haven't popped yet, that's okay. If you haven't found your signature style yet, it's all right. You are well on your way. I want you to all know that you are definitely on your way to finding it. And these exercises will get you there. And if you're finding that these exercises are not getting you there, then definitely reach out to me again, because it might be that we need to tweak the exercise to push you a little bit further to find it. All right. What other questions do you have?
No questions, just a really big thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Jessica.
It was really nice. And I'll get back to you later in the year for the lefty thing. The lefty.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are lefties,
Yeah.
I do have a portal. I'll put that, if I haven't already, I'll put that in an email so everyone can have access to the lefty resources. And yeah, I have a lot planning, actually planning for 2024 right now. And so everything that I've been offering lately is building up to that. So yeah, tell your friends. Yes, Neelam.
Yeah.
I have a quick question about the slow practice and the fast practice.
Yes.
Is there like a balance you would want to have in, like, I would probably do 10 to 15 minutes realistically every day. So is it like, would you do both in one session, or would you alternate, like one day is only slow practice, the other is the next day is fast practice? Because the fast made me very uncomfortable. So just if you have any pointers for that.
So as far as your practice goes, my suggestion is to set a goal. What is it you want to accomplish in that 10 to 15 minutes that you're going to have? And then if you're specifically saying, I want to work on speed, I would do both. So that you can physically feel the difference, because you may forget between sessions, what does fast feel like? What does slow feel like? And so I would do that. And it might be that you want to work longer on one than the other, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be equal. And you might flip between the two. But the key piece is what is it you want to get out of by going fast and slow? What do you hope to accomplish by going slow? What do you hope to accomplish by going fast? And then test yourself and test doing that against your goal.
Okay.
So yeah.
Thanks.
Heather, I had
Good.
a question. I
Yeah.
put it in the chat, but I didn't put question marks, so I'll just ask it now. So when you're writing, sometimes when my pen is back in between my thumb and forefinger or first finger, I get tired. And so then I think, oh, I need to put it upright more.
Yes.
Is there a rule that makes a difference, or is it just rotating back and forth between the two?
Excellent. First of all, good for you for noticing that you do something to change that. The first thing I tell people to do is notice your grip. If your hands are getting sore and your jaw and your shoulders are sore, then you are gripping your tool too hard. And so you want to like press it like you're going to break it and then barely hold on to it and then try to figure out where that middle ground is. Now, if you are adjusting between here and here, then what that's telling me is you are trying to compensate for your muscles in your fingers to try to find a comfortable place. So I'm going to tell you to do something so different that it might blow some people's minds here. And that is, if anybody here has been trained in the Palmer method of cursive, you use more of your elbows and your shoulders. You use a broader muscle group so that you're not putting too much pressure on just your hands. If you're all just starting out and you're having hand cramps, it's because you haven't built up the muscles in your fingers. So doing different hand exercises, a lot of times I'll play with my tools and before I get started and just connect with them. They feel different sizes, go in different order, but there's lots of different hand exercises you can do. But if for some reason none of those things work, then start thinking about using the Palmer method, which means you're using less of your fingers and more of your shoulders and your elbows. And what that does is it helps relax the hand a little bit so you can focus on keeping a steady, if you're writing and you like to keep a very steady angle, then what will happen is that locks that into place and lets your larger muscles do the heavy lifting, because those little muscles get really tired. Yeah. Does that help? Yeah. It's not something we even went over yet, but I will go over it.
Yes, no.
Yeah. I will go over those types of movements when I start teaching cursive, because that's something I'm getting into now. Is I'll get into, I don't know if I'll get it. Well, I'll find out if I get my certification. But cursive is something that I feel like it's not something I ever wanted to do, but after preparing for this course, I realized that it's something that I think the rest of the world might need. Yeah. 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 So Elisa's saying she wants to use the script font for titles and keywords. Would I learn that in your brush lettering class? Yes. And brush lettering class is going to teach you script. So if you want to go larger, go with that bigger tool. And when to use it kind of thing, that's is really the level up class. I know you've taken level up. So anyone who has taken my level up class before, my goal someday is to put it all in one place. And if you've already taken it, you'll get access to, and I think you already do get access to new things that I put out there. So I'm going to make a more concerted effort for that. Good. Any other questions that people want to unmute and ask? Otherwise, I'm going to roll through the chat, see if there's anything that pops out. And of course, I'll address everything in a follow-up bonus video.
I'm excited. I just signed up for your August 1st.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. So glad you'll be a part of that. Now, you may not receive the paper in time, but you'll get it anyway. For sure, you're going to get it. So just know that you will get that. Yes. And Neelam's saying squeezing a stress ball helps her loosen any tightened muscles. That is really great, because this really is about building up the muscles in our hands, because these little muscles, we use them for other things. And since you all have put in 5 hours of practice, at least just in the classroom time, and if you need to drop off, I understand. Thank you for being here. But you have put 2.5 hours just today, maybe more if you practiced before you got here. And so you're building up those muscles. So this is, having your squishy ball is great too. Good. Thank you. Yeah, I love that the course is leading you back to cursive. That's exactly what happened to me. Yeah. Good. Well, thank you everyone for joining me. This has been so much fun, and probably not what you expected, because it's something I've never taught before, but I've been playing with a lot of these tools over the years, sneaking them into my classes, testing them out on people, and they've been working. And truly, this was how I came to find my signature style. Now, if you keep practicing and you still can't find your signature style, please reach out to me. I want to help you find it, because I love a good challenge. So thanks everyone.